Good evening and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tonight we're going to have a conversation on Lifelines, an inspirational journey from profound darkness to radiant light with Melissa Bernstein and Zibby Owens. Zibby Owens is the creator and host of the award-winning podcast Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. She's the author and editor of Moms Don't Have Time to a Quarantine Anthology, a mother of four, and Melissa Bernstein is the co-founder of toy company Melissa and Doug, and a mother of six. We're going to discuss tonight Melissa's new book, Lifelines, an inspirational journey from profound darkness to radiant light, and learn how Melissa's personal journey and triumph over anxiety, depression, and despair led her to write this story and create her website, Lifelines. She hopes it will help others find their path to meaning and inner peace. And our discussion will be followed by a live Q&A, so ask, as Melissa said, any question you like. I wanted to mention that this program is co-sponsored by the Bert and Sandra Wasserman Center for Family Life, the Lambert Center for the Arts and Ideas, Macomb Meditation and Mindfulness, and the Center for Health and Wellness. As the Director of Health and Wellness, I'd love to start, if we could, with one of my favorite lifelines so far from Melissa's book. And just so we have a mindful pause to begin. Take a deep breath in, everybody. And exhale. Don't just be a dancer. Feel the rhythm in each move. Don't just be a singer. Find the pulse within the groove. Don't just be a writer. Flow as freely as the words. And don't just be a pilot, soar euphoric as the birds. Don't just be a painter, merge completely into art. Don't just be a thinker, live unbridled in the heart. Welcome to the call, Zibby. Welcome to the call, Melissa. I'm going to spotlight you both and let you take it away.
Hi. Thank you, Caroline. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was beautiful. You made me start with like a tear in my eye. Thank you for reading that.
That was so nice. Why don't you just keep reading? I'll just sit here and we can hang out and listen. It was awesome. That's the calmest I've been all day. That's great.
I love starting with a mindfulness moment. It just helps, right? Even if 2 minutes. And that's what I loved about your poems, Melissa, or not poems, your lifelines. I don't want to call them poems because you don't want to call them poems, but they are just these mini gems to help center, ground, elevate, lift, and so appreciative of that.
Thank you. That means so much to me. I really appreciate that.
Well, Melissa, when we last
spoke,
hi, how are you?
Fine.
You said I could ask anything, so be fair. I don't know. I'll try to come up with something good.
I'm ready. I love it.
When we last spoke, this book was just coming onto the horizon, and in it were your innermost feelings, things that a lot of people didn't know you had ever thought or felt or experienced, and you were ready to put it out there. What has it been like now that it's out in the world? Is it what you expected when we last spoke? Has it been better, worse, surprising?
Wow, that's an amazing question. It has been the most, I think, surprising, revelatory thing ever, because I thought I understood the despair that existed in the world, but I actually don't think I ever imagined that sharing my own experience would encourage so many people to share their truths with me as well. And I think there was a piece that appeared on CBS Sunday Morning, which I had always been told was a really amazing place to tell your story. And they take such beautiful care with stories and like cherish them. But I never imagined that in the 3 days that followed that segment that I would receive 10,000 letters, literally.
Wow.
And each one was more powerful than the next. Like people truly saying, I'm sharing my story with you for the very first time. And it was overwhelming, like in a positive way that I didn't feel alone, but in a despairing way as well, in that I just didn't even fathom the amount of isolation and sadness that existed. And that, our mission, which was simply, peer-to-peer support and showing people they're not alone, was like so much greater than I ever imagined.
Wow. So what do you do with that now? Do you, like when you, and you said at the beginning, you were going to write everybody back. And I remember emailing you from like the link you put in the book. And I was like, there's no way she'll write me back. And like very soon you're like, no, it's me. Hello. So with 10,000 notes, how do you even decide what you have time to respond to? And who do you refer for perhaps additional help? How do you know what people need? Like that puts you in a very important, that's a critical position, and that one that might make you feel responsible for what happens next to a lot of people.
Yeah, it was. And to be honest with you, to tell you a really honest story, is it almost threatened to put me under and engage me in the same behavior that led to a lot of my bad patterns in the past, because I knew I couldn't let anyone down. Like if people are writing to me and telling me their truth for the first time, that was me. Like I could not let people like me down. So I basically said, I'm going to write everyone back. And pretty much for about close to a month, I slept like 3 hours a night. And it became so this ever-present feeling like I've got to do more, that it almost became my very damaging behavior of my entire life that I had worked so hard to protect, because it was like this rabid need to finish and to make sure. And I had to do like 500 a day.
Oh my gosh.
In order to get ahead of it. So, because I wanted to, it was something I promised and I knew I wanted to do, and I didn't want to do a form letter, and I didn't want others on my team to pretend they were me. Like I knew I had to do it. And so I did. I'm not a hero, but meaning it is something that's really important to us. And our whole mantra at Lifelines is you are not alone. So like if I left people, cast aside feeling alone, that I wasn't even living out our simple mission.
Well, I think your book is a mission in the in a tome, in an unforgettable package, right? Like if anybody ever doubts it, all they have to do is pick up this new sort of Bible of connection that you've created. Do you feel like you turned, and that you will continue to turn back to some of your own lifelines? Like, is it the kind of thing where if you reread it yourself, you think to yourself, okay, I can't possibly be on demand for all of these things. Or if I read this particular time from this time in my life, like, does it work that way? Or do you then go and start writing new ones for yourself? Like, what does your self-soothing look like?
I had to write new lifelines. And I wrote one that I say to myself every day, which is, I can navigate your journey, but can't wear your backpack too, for you wouldn't learn the lessons that enable real breakthrough. Because I had to literally, excuse me, I'm going to take a drink. I had to literally say to myself, like, I can't carry the burden for all these folks, because all these folks, they wanted me to save them. And they were like, please help me. You're the only one that can help me. I've tried everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even barely save myself, much less save everyone else. But I felt this terrible burden that I needed to. And I had to go to my own, very wise therapist and really talk to her about like what folks do who aren't professionals, who've purely just taken a journey themselves and feel like they've seen the light and believe they can shine their light on others, but truly aren't credentialed to help people who are in deep despair. So I really had to understand that my role is one that just can share her experience, offer communion, like stand shoulder to shoulder with people, shine my light on the pathway that I took that changed my life, And that's pretty much, that's pretty much all I'm capable of. And it was really hard. I had to accept that for those that need more help or want more from me or anyone else, I unfortunately have to say, I'm so sorry, but that's like all I can do.
And Melissa, it's not like you're just an author, or it's not like you're just someone who's there to support other people. You have your own 6 children and a husband and a business. And like, it's, there is a lot on your plate right now. How do you figure out how to be there for so many different groups? How are you dealing with your kids at the same time as, and how do you recommend other people who are going through a depression similar to yours or different, your existential depression, as you write about so eloquently, or grief or anything else? How do you deal with that? I mean, I just started this community called Moms Don't Have Time to Grieve, because so many people were saying, I'm crying so much, but what about my kids and all of that? So how do you do that?
I mean, one of our workshops recently, and one of our community members, Eileen's here, so she knows, she supports me. Thank you, Eileen, for being here. Was on balance and how there's no such thing, and you can try to balance your life, and balance to me is like a sister of perfection. So you know what? I try to do the best I can, and I think, in these early stages of building this community, definitely the balance is on Lifelines. And I feel like I owe it to all these folks that are in such despair more than my kids at this point. And I'm giving all I can to them, but I think I owe it to these folks that are writing me, who are in such a dark place. And I try to share that with my kids. I think the more as moms that we can share what we're doing and the importance of it, and allow them to see that we have other passions in our lives, and that's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing that our meaning doesn't come just from our children. So I believe in showing them that. Hopefully, they're not happy with it. Don't get me wrong. They're like, oh, not more Lifelines. But it's the reality. And I tell them people need us, and we're feeling like we're doing something really, really helpful to many. And that has to be good enough for them right now.
So you were joking a little bit before the session when Doug made a sort of cameo appearance here about how you formed your business before you even got married. And of course, your company name has both of your names. And yet here you went off on this other sort of tangent, tangent, that sounds like unplanned. This other path.
Going off here.
No, yeah. I'm just going to, be a lifeline to thousands of people. But this is a direction you went in that was a clear departure from that sort of happy toy brand.
Yeah.
Did you worry about how that would impact your business and or your relationship at all?
Wow, that's a really good question. I guess the good and the bad is I didn't do this until middle age, because I was terrified of doing it, and I repressed and denied everything I felt up until middle age. Because of that very reason, that I couldn't show anything other than perfection, and I had to, protect everyone around me. And I didn't want to admit the truth to myself, because it would mean I was imperfect. So I think by the time it happened, there was no choice. I was in such, I say pain plus resistance equals suffering. And I was in such pain. It wasn't pain I acknowledged, but I was in such pain from denying myself and everything I felt. I was resisting it with all my might, my whole life, and pretending I was someone else. And that is so exhausting. And I was serving everyone else. I wasn't serving my own needs. I had put on a show kind of my whole life, not realizing it. That was my life. And I got to the point where I was so utterly exhausted that I couldn't do it any longer. And I remember it was truly just one regular day, but one little thing happened. I don't even remember what it is, because the thing itself was insignificant. But I remember just taking a deep breath and sitting down, and I was like, that's it. I'm done. I can't do it any longer. I need help. And I finally need to make this journey inward and figure out who the heck Melissa really is, and accept that I'm more than just one emotion, which is great, perfect, fine. So that was when, and I didn't care anymore. At that point, I think the cry again of my own self to be authentically seen finally was so loud that it was like, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what anyone thought of me, because that's all that had mattered my whole life. And what had it done for me? Nothing. Like I was still as empty and bereft within as I had ever been. So I knew that wasn't the answer. So I was like, well, if that's not the answer, I'm going to go with authenticity. And, the pathway between an inauthentic life and an authentic life is anguish. It's tremendous anxiety. And I was terrified of going through that to get to my authentic self. And when I finally cracked, I had to admit I couldn't do it alone because I was terrified of facing those demons inside. And that was when, I admitted I wasn't perfect. I was going to need help. I needed a partner to make that journey inward. And I enlisted the help of my now dear friend, my therapist. And she helped me to finally turn directions and head inward.
I mean, I think maybe being perfect is overrated anyway, right? Because if you're too perfect, then people are annoyed at you anyway. It's like you can't win. So you might as well be yourself. And I feel like so much of fiction and memoir and so many books, there's usually something in there about a secret that is eating away at someone. That's like such a common theme. And I feel like the biggest secret of all is that you're not being true to what you're feeling, right? Like having to hide that alone, right, is just the must be the hardest part of all. And having to go through life sort of feeling like it's not a sham, but just that you're keeping this big secret from even your closest relationships. And I remember, go ahead.
No, you go finish. You remember?
No, I was just going to say, when you opened up about it to some of your friends, as you wrote about, they weren't always so receptive. I know you shared more with your closest family and everything, but tell me a little bit more about that and sort of like the secrecy of, and the shame you felt of not feeling so perfect.
Well, the truth is, what I was going to say is in 90% of the letters I read, it's exactly the same thing. Like everyone writes me, I'm living a lie. Nobody knows. I have the perfect facade. At work, they would never guess. And inside, I'm a mess. So I think this is the American way. I hate to say it, like society has told us. And I grew up with the message like, buck up, be strong, grin and bear it, put on the shiny face, like you soldier through. And I believed that was my duty as a person, to not show how I'm feeling and just grin and bear it. And I kind of anchored on to martyrdom as my, like I would be rewarded in the next life, for giving and smiling and being this like strong person who could muster through anything. So I think there are many who are in that same boat, so to speak. And many women especially, I think, fall into these serving roles very young, and we just continue on and feel we can't serve ourselves, we have to serve others, and we hide the fact that inside we're like really close to breaking. So, I had that, plus I had my own existential despair, which was just a meaning crisis in and of itself. But I think it's very common to live a lie and wear that facade. And, I think most of us live that facade. And when it comes to facing the anguish that it would take to not live it and to rip it off, we become terrified, because it is terrifying. I mean, to not wear the facade, you have to look inside and say, who am I without the facade? And how do I want to spend the rest of my life? And what is the meaning of life? And what do I value? And what do I care about? And you have to accept all the full spectrum of emotion. It's not just about the shiny smile. It's about a lot of despair that's going to, come to any one of us during our lives. And I think reality is tough. So I think many of us continue to live in the inauthentic life and wear the facade and just pretend it's not happening to avoid it, distract ourselves, numb ourselves, and any number of coping mechanisms to avoid it. But I got to that point where I had done that. I had been engaged in my coping mechanism was the futile race. It was constant and incessant activity away from everything I felt to drown out the drumbeat of mortality. And I did everything. Every minute of time was orchestrated so that I didn't have to feel. And ultimately, I realized with sadness, because I wasted a lot of decades of my life in mindless doing, that it didn't lead me any closer to salvation. So the only path I needed to take was the most challenging one that I had avoided my whole life, which was, again, that journey inward to self-acceptance.
Wow. Well, I have to admit, I'm one of those many people who was sort of hiding their unhappiness for a while.
Yeah.
And after I got divorced and I ended up in the new relationship, now I'm married again. So many people were like, oh my gosh, like you look like a different person. You look so happy. And so many people started saying that to me that my husband now was like, what did you look like before? And I was like, I thought I looked fine. Like, and at one point I was like, I've got to go to some of these photo albums, because how could people, people might not know that you're in pain, but I think that they can sense perhaps more when you're hiding something. But yes, the liberating feeling of actually being who you are is amazing. And you wrote about the link between these deep feelings and creativity, and how you were able to channel all that into the creation of your business and toy after toy and new ideas. And now, of course, this unique format of a book, which is throwing what a book looks like and should feel like, and in every way, tactile and emotional and everything, on its head, right? Just like you did for how we play with toys, perhaps. Tell me about the link between creativity and some of the internal despair and how to reconcile those two.
That's a great question and such a deep topic. I think I was born very creative, and what I now know is the qualities that enable me to create from nothing, I call it a white space creative, are very stigmatizing qualities. They are, I call it a hypersensitive, overexcitable personality that by conventional society is considered really weird. I'm highly sensitive. I'm extremely emotional. I'm very intellectual. I ask why all the time and have this rabid need to know why. Like, I don't want to, be put off. Like, if I have a need to know, I'm like, no, why? Repeat it again. I'm very much in my imagination and have a lot of really weird ideas. I mutter to myself. I use a lot of hand gesticulations. And, to most people, growing up, I was one of those really weird people when I let my true self come out. I looked not that part. So I was in this really odd space of kind of like looking like the conventional part, but being really weird in who I was, which made it really challenging to fit in. And I think because I didn't fit in, and because I was never accepted as being and weird, odd, overly dramatic, overly dogmatic creative, I hid everything I was, and I denied everything I was, and I tried to fit in. And anything that made me creative, I despised. So the fact that I was creative was not a good thing, and I never saw it as good. In fact, it was only last year that I began to even associate myself as being a creative person. My entire life, the adjective I never would have used to describe myself would have been creative. In fact, I in junior high, 9th grade, which was as high school now, I was voted as like a superlative, because at the end there was this big deal where the whole school voted on people who exemplified certain qualities, and I received most musical, because I was really musical. I wrote music and I sang and I played every instrument. And I was so upset to have won that and not one of the ones based on looks. Like, I was determined I had to win one that was superficial. And that when I got my yearbook at the end of that year, I ripped out the page that had my photo on it and said most musical, and threw it in the trash. And I think about that. So it was such sadness, because like I was recognized at a really artsy school for being most musical, which is something I should have like felt such pride over. And I recently looked up the guy that I won it with, because it was always a male and a female. And he's now like, he tours around the world playing saxophone, and he's a professor of music at UCLA. And it was like, that was the company like I was in, yet I was in such denial of being that person and wanting something related to superficial looks that anyway, I was really messed up and in complete denial. So, but I now see, once I got to middle age and saw that I did have a condition that had a name called existential depression, and that people who were afflicted with existential depression were actually highly prolifically creative. It was the most shock and awe that I had ever experienced in my life, because I was like, wait, like I'm potentially not that I am in the company, but the same source of anguish birthing our creativity exists in me, in some of these other folks. Like I couldn't even believe it. And then I started to say, you mean I actually might have what I call a blurse, in that my curse, which was only a curse my whole life, like these awful qualities that everybody laughed at, are actually the very same qualities that give me this ability to create from nothing. And that ability just doesn't come out of thin air. It actually comes with a fairly challenging personality. And it was like that negative mind story that told me you're a complete and utter loser because of these qualities suddenly said, wait a second, actually, they may be the very reason you're alive, and your meaning and your purpose all in one. And I literally, for about 3 weeks, I couldn't even speak, because I was just sitting there like, wait a second. Like I tried to kill myself my whole life for those qualities. And now you're telling me like they're really good. Like what's going on here? And that really was part of my own mission to help others, especially those who are highly creative, realize that those very qualities that make them not fit in with conventional society are actually their gift. And I want folks like myself as a child to be accepted and heralded and held up just like anyone else would be, for being special in our ability to do something that others can't do, and everyone else has their own abilities that they should be heralded for.
If only like mean middle school girls would get the message. Do you know what I mean? Like the problem is that no matter how sort of self-actualized you may be and feel and know, you're still unfortunately thrust into the mix of unrelenting snickering and whatever else girls tend to do. And not just girls, I guess, but I don't know. I have middle schoolers. I have some middle schoolers.
And you know, now that my community is rallying around me, because I know there are people like me, and they're always these beautiful, self-deprecating, witty, funny people like Eileen. You know, I've had so many letters say, I would have hung out with you at the lunch table in high school. And I just like that is such a beautiful thought, because and I laugh when I read it, because I didn't even hang out at the lunch table. I ate my lunch in the stall of the bathroom, on the seat, the toilet seat, because I couldn't even bear to go near the cafeteria, because I felt so that I would, you know, I couldn't even bear to see sort of those people that I would potentially never be accepted by in there. So I've written back some of them. I'm like, well, would you have had lunch in the stall of the bathroom? And they're like, absolutely, count me in, give me the left side of the toilet seat. I'm like, that's my people. So I love that. And I get emotional even thinking about it, because, you know, it's horrible to be in a place where you feel you don't belong, when you actually have all these wonderful qualities that you just want people to accept you for.
And in truth, most people have a whole range of amazing qualities. I mean, this sounds
exactly,
so funky, but like everyone is born with, you know, all sorts of gifts and talents, and personality things that might not come out till later. And I think one of the tragedies, like you were saying, like several times, this came out in middle age. Sometimes it just takes time. Like sometimes you have to get to this point where you realize, and it's hard to teach. It's hard to say to someone else, like, no, like you're going to be fine. Like I feel like sometimes it has to come from you.
I think it's a combination. I think society does us a real disservice. And I believe that if there had been more acceptance of a highly sensitive personality, that is the necessity of someone who's that creative. I think we, instead of being told you're two or you're so, like we can change our personality, we'd be more accepted for it. And I think part of it is when you have a highly sensitive personality, you seem like you're being overly reactive and overly dramatic and too emotional and too, passionate and all those things that you're called to, you're to ... when it's who you are. So when someone tells you you're two and all you're showing is who you actually are, you immediately feel like, well, gosh, then what I actually am can't be accepted, right? What I actually am is then no good. And I have to change who I am to be accepted. So I think it's obviously a combination, but for me, it was largely societal, I would say. That made me feel that what I was and how I was not acceptable.
I have these books, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it has like a quote on it, and it says something like, some people will think you're too much. Like those are not your people. Because it's true. Like, yeah, these people saying you're too this, you're too that. Well, like, what's up with them? Like, why are they sitting around saying that? So anyway,
I agree with you. I wish we could, I wish we could understand that.
Tell me a little bit more about writing, about taking, I know these lifelines you'd written over a long period of time, but tell me about the process of turning it into a book and making it into the creation that it is. What was that like? Would you do it again? How did it feel? All of that.
It was the most incredible experience ever. And, I wrote these verses from the time I was like age 2 on. The minute I came up with words, I started writing verses and never shared them with anyone because I believed they were too simple, too dark, and too despairing to really ever touch anyone. And by the time I decided to let them guide this book, I had 3,500 of them that had never seen the light. And I write them every day. Some days I write 1, some days I write 10. So I continue to write them because they are my salvation. And they really do help me make sense of things that don't make sense in my head. So they really guided the process because they were the truest expressions of my soul that I had hid from the world. And I felt like while they stayed shrouded in darkness, so did I. And they had saved me. They were my lifelines that kept me alive my whole life, reciting them and clinging to them like a beacon. So I really felt like if they had the power to save me, perhaps maybe they could touch someone else. And I wanted them to come out in the light. So basically, I took all of them. There were like 3,500 of them. And I separated them out into the themes that they covered. And strangely enough, there were like an equal amount of verses in 11 different themes. And those became the volumes of the book. And really between those and my journal writings and some other reflections that I had throughout my days, I really was able to sort of piece it together very simply. And it only took a few months. And I'll tell you a really important story along those lines. So I enlisted a very powerful, well-known literary agent to help me in the process of creating a book, because I thought that's what I needed. And that's what book, when you wrote a book, you did. And she agreed right away. She's like been, the literary agent for like some of the very best books. And she was so excited and we hit it off. We were like, real kindred spirits. And she said, so I want you to send me sort of what you're thinking, an outline, and we'll really talk about it volume by volume. And when she said it, I was kind of like, that's weird. Like, I've always created products like from my head and from gut intuition, and I never really use anybody's. I thought she was just going to help me get it published, like get it to the right publishing house. But so she said, and I was like, oh, sure, okay. And then I basically proceeded to write the entire book. Like in basically 2 to 3 months, I wrote, it was started like 900 pages, but I ended up whittling it down to whatever, 647. And I was so excited. I'm like, she's going to be so excited by me, because instead of giving her this silly outline, I'm going to actually give her the entire book. So I have this book. I'm like, how am I going to get it to her? I figure out how to, whatever it is, we transfer it to her. And I'm like, guess what, honey? Instead of the outline, here's the whole book. And I was like, she's going to like, I'm going to get the gold star of anyone she's ever worked with. So like a week goes by, like 2 weeks goes by. I'm like, this is really weird. I mean, yes, it's a lot of pages, but I thought immediately she was going to be like, you rock. Oh my gosh, this is a bestseller. Anyway, I end up getting this letter back that was one of the most disturbing experiences of my life, because she basically said, what the blank did you do? I can't believe you sent me this whole book without even letting me see an outline. And just so you know, the two worst genres are memoir and verses, and combining them together is a recipe for disaster. And this book will never sell. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, here I go again. Because any of you who've read my book, I had this experience happen in my 20s when I submitted my verses for an MFA, when our business started to falter. And I was like tacitly rejected from the head of the department as my verses being too sophomoric and like not worthy of erudite people. So I was like, oh, here we go again. And I was devastated. I mean, devastated, because if there's anything that was the most authentic product I'd ever created in my 50 years, it was that book. It was like the essence of who I was. And for someone to say, this will never sell, and basically like, you know, it's horrible, was like, well, there you go, worthless once again. And I couldn't even tell Doug. For like 3 days, I sat on that letter, and even thinking about it, I would just start to sob, because I was like, what am I going to do now? I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. And I finally got the courage to tell him. I was like, Doug, she wrote me back and it wasn't good. You know, she thinks it stinks and it's not going to sell. And I watched him read it, and he was reading it, and he was like getting this grin on his face. And by the end, he was like laughing. And I'm like, why are you laughing? Like, I was getting really annoyed. I'm like, this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. Why are you laughing? I was so angry at him. And he was like, Melissa, think about it. Has anything you've ever created in your life gotten hands down applause? I'm like, no, that's why I'm so upset. He's like, when you did people like it? No. When you created your toys, do we win all the conventional awards? No. And, you know, and we went on and on. He goes, so why did you think this would be any different? I was like, because I wanted to, you know, touch people. He's like, it's going to touch people, honey, and we're going to do it on our own. Just like we've done everything in our career, we're going to do this thing entirely on our own, write her back and say, thank you, but no thank you. I am going at this alone. And I did. That moment, I was like, thank you, but no thank you, but I'm going at this alone. And we did. We decided we weren't going to change a word. We were going to publish it like the best quality, using all these cool things that no one ever does, at a price point that is like we're breaking even on, because it's a really expensive book to make. And we're just going to put it out there. And when it hit #1 on all Amazon a few weeks ago, of every book, I looked at Doug and I said, I'll get emotional. You know, that's what following your authenticity can do, if you do it from the heart. So it was a really great lesson to follow your heart and to not buckle to convention.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, what an inspirational story.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a good one.
It's a good one.
It is, and it's the truth.
I think that so often when we try to accomplish things, right, there are all these gatekeepers, and all they have to go on are past successes. But the people who break out of those molds, those are all the people historically who have done cool things. But
Exactly.
and that's why people say no, because they're like, nope, this doesn't fit into a mold. So
Yeah.
nope. Really thrillers are in this month. You don't have a thriller, sorry. No, but it's really those people not having the vision.
Yeah.
If you're
And what Doug and I always would say with our toys is we'd say, maybe memoir and verse doesn't sell because no one's done it the way we're going to do it.
Yep.
Just because it hasn't succeeded in the past, does that mean you can't do it in a way that makes it succeed? And every category of toys we came out with at Melissa and Doug, by the way, was a dull, boring, lackluster category that no one had touched ever. And we went into them and reinvigorated them because we transformed them. So it was that same message. And I should have been better able to handle it, I think. But still, when you get that like rejection in such a profound way, it is painful. And no matter how confident you are, or how many wins you've had in your backpack, like you hear that and it really can take you down.
My gosh, I literally this morning just interviewed the woman who wrote this book, The Rejection That Changed My Life, 25
That's
powerful women on
hysterical.
being let down and turning it around. Anyway, the rejections have ended up making everybody's life, making women
Yeah.
successful, all of it. So it's such a good point.
I
Well,
agree with that.
what advice would you have aside from following your heart and doing the most authentic thing to, well, A, people who are out there and they want to start their own project, but maybe they don't know where to start, and B, people who are feeling this, that they're living their lives sort of as a secret? What advice to those two groups? And then we can open it up for questions and everything.
I mean, I think telling our story is the most healing thing we can do. And meaning, I tell so many people, like, I didn't mean this story to ever come out. I wasn't necessarily saying like, I'm going to publish this and it's going to become like, go get out there. I wrote it really to heal myself, because while I was hiding from all those disparate parts of who I was, which are every one of those volumes, I wasn't living an authentic life. And you have to heal yourself before you can ever think about healing anyone else. So I needed to heal myself. And I feel like so many of us are living this lie, and we have this beautiful story that we need to tell, yet we're terrified to tell it. So don't tell it to anyone, write it down. And I feel like when you write it down, and don't write it down for others to see it, write it down as it flows from your heart in its rawness and its authenticity. And don't leave a thing out of it. Like write like you've never written until you have nothing left to write. And then once you can look at your story as a third person, I feel like it takes on a much different tinge to it. I feel like then you can look at it and almost say, wow, like you've lived through a lot, and you can begin to look at yourself with more pride than disgust, and really see that you're not the weak, the weak person, the misfit you think you were. You actually are really courageous, and you've been through a lot to still be here, despite all the adversity you've faced. So, I think everyone should write down their story. And, in some of our workshops on our ecosystem, we're having like people sharing their story. And I think there will come a time when you will want to share that story, whether it's just with your partner, with your children, with yourself, or with the entire world. I mean, a lot of those stories, look at Hillbilly Elegy. A lot of those stories become motion pictures and incredible books that go on to change so many. So write your story, no matter who it's for, write it for you to heal yourself. I think anyone can do that. As long as you have some paper or a computer and a pen or fingers, you can write that. And then in terms of being stuck, which so many of us are, especially in this past year, and sort of being in this place where we've like lost the will, we're apathetic, we don't know how to how to move. I mean, I think, for me, it came down to a choice. And I always look at it as at the end of life, sort of when you're looking back, like, what do you want your life to have been? And I read a lot before I got the courage to really sort of be me. I read a lot of books about hospice workers who worked with the dying, because I wanted to know more than anything, like when people are on their deathbeds, like what do they regret? And it always was the same thing. The number one regret of the dying, no matter where you look at it, is always the same thing. It's, I never lived a life true to myself. And it's basically that if you think about society and that 90+% of people are on the inauthentic side of the mountain, or if there are two mountains with a cliff between it, 90% are in the inauthentic side and stay there until they see the light at the end of their life. And they're like, darn, I lived an inauthentic life. I never had the courage to go across the abyss of anguish and get to authenticity. If you know that all these people are getting there and it's too late for them, to me, that's can start to be the impetus to some self-reflection and some thinking, you know what, there's got to be a different way. And I think our ecosystem, which is entirely free, is a good start. Like, we offer community. We offer a lot of people who for the first time are coming together and sharing parts of themselves that they never have. And we have people every day who are saying, for a year, I haven't seen a soul and I'm talking for the first time. And that's great. That's a start. I mean, that's community. That's sharing who you are. That's being authentic. And then we have this journey, and the journey is the same journey I took that led to all my light and my self-acceptance. So it's not anything so different than any hero's journey, but it was my way of making sense of it. And for me, it's a hike with a backpack and a compass and has a lot of metaphors. And the truth is, if you really want to do the work, because life is an art and takes work to live a meaningful life, that journey will take you to the promised land. I mean, that journey, if you do it consciously and intentionally and really don't spiritually bypass, a lot of the exercises, you will get to the caverns of your soul and basically come to terms with all your wounded inner child, all your negative cognitions, and you will begin to tell yourself a different truth and end up embracing yourself and emerging from that. So I think it's a choice. I view life as a choice, and we all have the choice to make whether we want to stay in inauthenticity and hide ourselves from the truth, or go across the chasm of anxiety to authenticity. But anxiety is necessary and critical for transcendence and growth. And that's what people don't realize. They face the anxiety and they think, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. I need to either get rid of the anxiety or avoid it or deny it. Unfortunately, read any of the philosophers from the beginning of time, and anxiety or angst is necessary and essential. And without it, you cannot have growth, because you're going to have to face the darkest caverns of your being. You're going to have to face the paradoxes of life, the duality of life, the fact that we're all going to ultimately die. There's a lot of darkness in that bridge from inauthenticity to authenticity. But ultimately, there's a lot of meaning in it too, because part of that work is going to be sowing your seeds of self-expression and really finding what gives your life meaning.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you so much. I know Caroline wants to open it up for questions, so I don't want to monopolize you here.
Yeah, I mean, I want to ask both of you a question, which is just that about legacy, right? And about, both of you have, Zibby, you have 4 kids, and Melissa, you have 6, and how you feel about, oh my gosh, we sort of live our parents through us, right? We're all individuals, but we also have the traits of our parents and our genealogy and our ancestors coming through us as well that we have to wrestle with. So as you think about this journey, which it sounds like man's search for meaning, right? It's just part of the human experience if we decide to go on it. How do you feel about knowing that your kids are going to have to go through that too, and supporting them through that?
Who wants to go first?
Well, it's, that's something that I feel, well, not the kids having to confront mortality necessarily, but confronting meaning and how to find meaning in their lives is something that I feel like I try to at least help with now, by pointing out things that I find give life meaning. Those are the things that I'm hopeful and optimistic that they'll be able to do. The things I most worry about are, God forbid, them feeling sick or getting in an accident or, getting somebody else being horribly mean to them. But I think the sort of inner searching and the inner work, I'm not afraid of that. I feel like my job is to give them tools to work their way through that. Like I have to give them the pickaxe to get them through that cave, if you will.
Beautiful. And Melissa, what about you?
I love that. I'm really proud that I am breaking my genealogy in expressing who I am finally. Because, there have been generations of folks that don't show how they're feeling. It's certainly in my family and in so many's, that it was weak to show how you feel, that it was weak to say, I feel sick, I feel tired, that it was, because we're fighters and we don't ever buckle and we don't ever show how we're feeling. And I feel like you can only shine the light you want to see. And I am trying to shine the light of a person that embraces the full spectrum of emotion and the full spectrum of life in all its duality and all its darkness and all its light. And, my practice to remain safe and sane is a daily thing that I engage in. And I have the metaphor of wearing my backpack, which is my Lifelines backpack of all the lifelines that I need to pull out on a daily basis to stay at the line or, slightly above. Because if I don't, I will fall under and maybe never come up. So I think what I'm trying to show my kids and everyone else is you can have a mental health affliction, because I do. I was born with existential depression and I will die with it as well. It doesn't go away. But if I maintain my practice every single day and use it to help myself to remain sort of where I want to be, I can live a really bountiful and fulfilling life. And that's what I want to show them, that you can be despairing, you can have low days, you can have days that you maybe even come close to losing hope, but you have the tools right on your back to use whenever you need them to support yourself and to know that you don't need any one thing or else to help you other than what's in you.
Yes, and it sounds like, Zibby, did you want to comment on that? It sounds like it also is about teaching the kids that, like, this is personal, meaning you're going to have to find your own lifelines. And in the tools that we have, these are the ones I've used, these are the ones that have been helpful, but we're each so unique and we're each so individual that the lifeline that you choose from this potpourri of various things, whether it's exercise or meditation or breathing or connecting to nature or, sharing your heart, writing your narrative and sharing your heart with somebody that you really love. There are many. I'm thinking reading. I mean, Zibby, I think one of your lifelines was actually, do you want to talk about, was actually reading?
Yes, reading has been there. That's like the most constant thing through all the upheaval and everything that goes through. So accessible. You just open up a book and you're in someone else's world, someone else's head, a story. I find it like this sort of amazing medicine. I know it takes time, but so does everything else. I mean, life is just time, right? It's just how we divide it and slice and dice it. So yes, I find books to be not only entertaining, but truly therapeutic, both the content and just the act of sort of escaping and learning more and all of that. So I've always, yes, huge fan of reading and writing. But I think if there's anything people could do to help more, it would be read more to help themselves.
Yeah. And I'm struck by, and I know Rachel has a question, but I'm also struck by when we read, right, the novels embrace the dark. They often go into those dark territories. And Melissa, you were talking about sort of your surprise at the despair.
Yeah.
Right. And Zibby, are you surprised that she got 10,000 emails?
I mean, maybe 10,000. I'm not surprised that people reached out, because I did the same thing when I finished. You just want to like talk to her. As soon as you get to the end, you want to be like, yes, because I feel like, Melissa, you made it like a conversation almost. Like you opened up not just a lifeline, but it's almost like an old-fashioned phone line, right? Like you opened up the party line and like let everybody in.
The party.
So
woohoo!
Yeah,
despair party here at Melissa's house.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not.
It's a pity party.
No, I didn't mean it that way. I'm glad that people, because for everyone who's writing you, there's like another 20 people who think it and aren't saying it too. So how great that they wrote it, and how great that you wrote them back. It's just, it's beautiful. It's just, it's beautiful.
I think I would be remiss to not ask you this question, which is, we're seeing more social isolation with technology, and especially with our young people that are on devices, and they're not using their hands in the same way, they're not using their bodies in the same way. Is that creating this existential crisis in some ways, do you think?
I think technology also opens up so much communication. I mean, look at us tonight, right? We're having this like totally deep conversation. I could have just been, I don't even know what I could have been doing anything, but instead we're in all different places having these talks. So I think if you use it in a certain way, I think it can be very helpful. Yeah. If you use it to connect.
Yeah, I think with kids, it really has an addictive property, because, it unleashes dopamine and that becomes addictive. So I think for adults, it's actually been a lifesaver for so many. And maybe their only form of connection the last year. If you use it properly, as Zibby said, like if you use social media, that can make you feel really, I think, the comparisons. But if you use it for like beautiful networking and connecting, then it's a positive. But I've seen with my kids, it's only a negative. My younger kids, because they've resorted to gaming, and they've resorted to like, TikTok, and just things that they can't seem to untether from, that are completely reactive, not engaging them in their senses, not engaging them in the moment. And I feel like setting up some really bad patterns for the future, not allowing them to focus. I mean, if you talk to any teacher, which I have, because I always talk to my kids' teachers, like the attention span of kids is like 8 seconds. They truly cannot even focus anymore for long periods of time because of too much technology.
Yeah, I do like the dancing part of TikTok. I think it's cool.
Yeah,
I do.
I agree.
My daughter loves TikTok, and she sometimes spends like half an hour learning a dance. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So I think again, in the right way.
In the right way.
I'm gonna invite my colleague Rachel to join me, and I know she has a question.
Okay, so in addition to my JCC work, I'm currently writing a musical about my experience as a teenager with housebound agoraphobia and mental illness. And as I'm writing it, it's sort of stirring up a lot of feelings, and I'm learning a lot about myself and things that I was pushing aside. And I wonder if you could just, if any advice, or just sort of, what did you learn? What was the most surprising thing you learned when you were writing Lifelines and when you were putting yourself out there?
Wow, that's an incredible question. I think I learned how deep and profound those feelings really were. Like when I was writing it, I mean, I was like sobbing the whole time. I mean, when I went to the, loneliness and powerlessness and all these things. And when I read my negative cognitions, like all the negative things I told myself, I was just so sad. I was so sad for that little girl who just wanted to be loved and was in such utter despair. So I think I would say to you, like, offer yourself compassion. Cry for yourself like you would cry for anyone who's been through a really rough time, and say, like, I just kept saying, putting my hand here and saying, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Because I wanted someone to say that to me all that time, like, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And no one did, of course, but now I'm offering myself that compassion that I so desperately wanted. And I think the more you can offer yourself compassion and feel empathy for that little child that suffered and maybe still suffers, the more you'll, through your words, be able to touch others, because you'll really be able to go there and feel that pain, and connect with others who are feeling the same pain.
Thank you.
And we have another question from Eileen, right? Eileen, hang on one second. Let me add you. And you can unmute, I think.
Hi, I just wanted to say I've been participating with Lifelines for a while now, and I just want to share with everyone, I've been in therapy. This is a level of communication that you get real feedback. I've had great therapists, but you never kind of get to know about them. And Melissa has such an energizing way of no judge, but gives you, again, makes me a little verklempt thinking about it. It's so uplifting. And there was an article in the Times yesterday, or I can't remember today, about languishing. And I think we're all sort of languishing, trying to get out of what we've lived through. And every time I'm on and listening to these, even this lovely, nice, intimate group, that you can share things that you don't normally share with other human beings. And we've all had our goods and our bads, and a lot of us have had really bads. But to share with other people, to know that there's other people that are living the same life. And just to say to Rachel, there's every age on this thing. There are young people, there are older people, and everybody has this same general connection because we're all human beings. And it's just, I highly recommend it. As Melissa says, it's free, but it feels so, you couldn't put a dollar value on it. But I just highly recommend everybody check it out, because it's just a beautiful, special, wonderful thing, especially right now, for what this lovely transition of maybe getting out of this stuff that we're living through and to the future we may have. So kudos and thank you to Melissa and all of you it's just so nice.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so much.
Eileen.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so nice. That's the type of people we have in our community.
It's totally special. I would love to see Rachel's face on there. I mean, it's cool too, because you start to see the same faces and there's a connection. I mean, just one little quick thing. I hate that it's sort of a little bit telling a story out of school, but there's so many people who speak regularly, and you see sort of at the beginning, people have been really sort of, how is this going to work, whatever. And then you're seeing light in people's eyes as they're sharing, and people who are just, a lot of us have had really bad stuff, but then the energy in their speech every time they come on, and the light that they're now radiating, and it's because this woman in front of you has kind of unleashed something super, super special. And Zibby, there's moms, there's people going through all of the same, like all of this stuff that y'all have to juggle. It's just crazy special. I just recommend it.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so sweet. That means the world.
It's from here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Well, there is no greater way to end tonight than on that positive note. Also, to just the power of gratitude. And thank you both for shining the light on mental illness in a way that I think is perhaps one of the most creative I have ever seen. I love the book. I know it's going to be a lifeline for me and for people in my life. And I thank you for having written it. And Zibby, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and interviewing your friend, right? And this lovely woman that you saw at the beginning. And I know my last question for you is, I guess, are you different now having interviewed her once before and now again? Do you know what I mean? Do you feel like
You can
the
say
book
no.
was-
You can say not one bit.
In other words, sometimes a book is like a recipe for me. It cooks with me. It settles with me. I think about it, and I know as I asked you to interview her again, it's not the same interview.
No, it's never the same interview. I love it. I loved it last time. I love it this time. I always hear new things. I feel so inspired by your story, Melissa, and watching you tear up, even the journey to publication itself. I mean, it's all very inspiring, and I feel really lucky to have gotten to talk to you tonight.
You're so sweet.
Awesome.
Thank you. That means the world. And I feel the same about you. I mean, you are an inspiration to so many for, again, proving that you can be human and still be really, really successful.
Thank you. Yes.
Really, really successful.
Yes, exactly. Let's hear it for that, right, everybody? Listen, I hear some people are clapping. Yes. Listen, thank you so much, everyone. Please be safe, be well. And maybe I'm just going to open the book one last time and see what came in for our life.
Oh, gosh.
Everyone. There's such beauty in this world that goes entirely unseen when we're caught in endless doing and imprisoned by routine. So may you break your routine and jump into the beauty of the world, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That
That means the world. Thanks, Caroline. Thank you, Zibby. Thank you,
it.
everyone, for joining us.
Thank
Take
you.
care,
There's
everyone.
something in your hearts now.
Bye now.
Bye.